Slides ahead, Charlie.
Questions moderated. Go ahead.
All right, guys. Welcome to the College of Complexes. There are two rules. First rule is one fool at a time, and that means when the speaker or somebody else is talking, you are not talking. And the second rule is no personal attacks. The college consists of the following format. There's going to be a brief introduction, or excuse me, announcements period, and they have to be announcements, followed by our speaker who'll have up to 60 minutes to give his presentation, followed by question and answers where you're going to ask questions with question marks. And then following that, there will be the rebuttals period, followed by a final rebuttal by the speaker. So whoever's got an announcement can do so at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Charlie, you ready?
Yes. All right. Welcome, everyone, to meeting number 3,811 of the College of Complexes, the playground for people who think. We maintain some email lists. If you'd like to get on our internal list, please send me an email and I'll put your address among them. Very little traffic. Okay, although I'm not a capitalist, I will give an advertisement for our upcoming programs. On April the 5th, next Saturday, the Illinois Single Payer Coalition, Bill Biaggi will be speaking. So we'll be talking about nationalized health care. Following that, on April the 12th, we have two programs in conjunction with Earth Day. At 12th, the Illinois Environmental Council will be here. They're a coalition of 100 and 200 eco groups. So they're representative of IEC will be talking about the states of the environment. On April the 19th, yours truly, we're going to be having a short quiz with questions. We'll discuss the answers to determine how green a voter are you. How green are you? Are you lime green or not at all? Are you a greenie? So it'll be an interesting program. I've got some really up-to-date information on the environment. Don't miss it. Good PowerPoint, short one. Following that, on April 26th, former member of Congress, Marie Newman from the South Side like me, will be talking about how to start a movement and advice for activists. She's got a new book out. So April the 26th, there'll be a program if you want to be an activist, Amanda, on how to become one. On May the 3rd, we just heard from him. We just booked him, special May Day speaker. We're going to have Justin Tucker. He hasn't given me the details yet, but he's going to be talking on the topic of Saul Alinsky and his book, The Rules for Radicals. That's on April the 3rd. May the 3rd. On May the 10th, we're going to be talking about Eric Malvey returning on great power politics of the world. He believes there's a multipolar world, but we'll leave it up to him to discuss that. Anyhow, that leaves open May 17, 24, and 31. Okay, I have one other announcement. This is for those of you who are interested. I put the information in chat. The Chicago Archaeological Society is presenting their programs just like we are on Zoom. The next one is 2:30 tomorrow Contact me if you want the link. It's going to be talking about exchanges between the residents of the ancient portion of the United States and the Southwest and Mexico. So Chicago Archaeological Society free lecture at 2:30 tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, who's next with the announcements? All right. Okay. I have one with me tonight. It's Eric Mao.
All right, our speaker tonight is Eric Mao, who will be talking about the wealth of the world, where we are and where are we heading in the world of wealth and who is on top. Eric Mao presents another detailed socio-economic analysis. Let's give it up for Eric Mao.
Thank you. Good to be back. There's a book published in 1776, the same year as Declaration of Independence, called The Wealth of Nations. Yeah, that's the deep book about capitalism written by Adam Smith. So 249 years later, today in Chicago, this nice establishment with protection of freedom of speech, and it's getting encroached out there, but so far so good in this space. We're going to talk about the wealth of worlds, the wealth of worlds. So the real title is the wealth of the worlds, the plural, because when it comes to wealth, the planet is actually two worlds. Whether you look at it in terms of global north and global south, that's two worlds. I will elaborate how they are two worlds, not one. And the US versus China, those are two worlds. And within the US, there's a top 1% and the bottom 99%, there's two worlds. And capitalism is getting to a next phase. So you have old capitalism. When we get there, we're in the process. You have old capitalism versus new capitalism. You can see the dichotomy, the two worlds. And of course, the good old capitalism versus socialism. Those are two worlds in terms of ideologically. So where wealth goes, where development goes. How do you develop a country? What do you need to develop a country? You need capital, and you need what else? Oh, you need capital. You need technology in this day and age. But ultimately, people develop countries. So people use their energy, human spirit, and energy in development. So I will point to, so really you want to look at the development, the wealth of nations, the wealth of worlds. You can look at where the energies are, where the people put their energy, their focus. And you want to look beyond the mass media. Because mass media, number one, doesn't give you like a real picture. It's sort of like you're washing your feet with your socks on, let alone the distortions agenda in today's mass media. So I would suggest you look beyond the mass media, look at the people, make your own observations one way or another. Of course, you can take mass media as a reference point, see what the other side is talking about. But use your own observation and look beyond. Look at the people, hear the people, or experience what people experience. That's what I do, and what I'm presenting today is mostly from that results from the fruit from my own work. in observation and feel and experience. So what? Okay. So what is the energy in the global north versus global south? First of all, global south is formerly known as the third world country, which was formerly colonies of the global north. You know who they are? G8, today's G7. And global south is the former colonies. So the former colonies, they want to pull themselves out of that situation. That's where their energy stems from. Of course, each country, it's a big world, right? They have different situations, different conditions, but what they have in common is their energy to pull themselves out of that situation in this day and age. After World War II, they got their political independence, but they don't have their economic independence yet. So they are working on it. That's where the energy comes from. That's why they coalesce. Some of the countries in the global south, their energy coalesce. They organize this organization called BRICS. Started with 5 countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now they're expanding to more countries: Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia, and there are other countries they're lining up. They're in application, or they're partner as a first step. So they're in different states. We're talking about dozens of more countries, 2 dozens. So where they are is the BRICS represents 45% of the world population, whereas G7 is 10%. So in terms of population, you can see where the energy tilts. In terms of, let alone they're hungrier because it's their time. They cannot wait any longer. Now that they have self-determination, politically, they want to put their energy in the economic development to improve their lives. And their GDP as a result. It's work in progress. The BRICS GDP, the total of the BRICS member GDP is 35% of the world GDP, whereas G7 is 30%. So it's surpassed G7. Of course, we're not talking about sports. It's not a fair comparison, because one is 7 countries, the other one is 10 plus countries. But it's not a sport. It's not a fair comparison because they start from different places. You know what I mean? And this global south in totality, not just BRICS member countries, global south has 40 to 45% of GDP, of the world GDP. And they represent two-thirds of the economic growth in the past 30 years. So the other side of the coin is the G7 countries, the first world countries, they barely have, they didn't have much growth. So growth is what we look at, because to me, it's more important, well, it's equally or more important to look at the trajectory, which is in the economic world, is the growth, economic growth. So part of the driver of the initial driver of the BRICS organization is China. China, you know, when we talk about where they start, China started at one of the poorest countries in the world, like right out of World War II. For China, it's not just right out of World War II. It was right out of 100 years of disaster. It was the poorest country in the world, one of the poorest countries. How poor? Haiti poor. How poor? How poor is that? But today, in terms of GDP, purchasing power, parity GDP, that's a more fair of a measure of GDP in terms of a relative comparison. China has surpassed the US in 2016. So starting from Haiti poor to surpassing the US as a country in terms of PPP, purchasing power parity GDP. Of course, nominal power GDP is still behind the US, but that's not a fair, very illuminating comparison. And the thing is, China is still third world country, still global south, not global north. Because in terms of per capita PPP GDP, each person per capita, China, US is at $84,590, and China is at $19,436. So it's less than less than a quarter of the US. So each Chinese citizen makes less than a quarter of the amount of money with compared to the US citizen. So that's why China is still third world country in the global south. And the life expectancy, right out of World War II, they're in the low 30s, 30 years old. Today, the life expectancy, China is at 78 years, 78.02 years versus US 79.46 years. It's right out there at par with the US. And infant mortality rate, US is 3.17, China is 3 per 1,000 babies. That defined as the baby survived, not surviving the first year. That's infant mortality per 1,000. So 3.17 versus 3. So you see where the Chinese people as a whole, the country as a whole, where they put their energy, because they were down for over 1,000 years disastrously. And it's time to get back up on their feet to improve their lives. You only live once. You gotta work hard. That's how they think, to bring it back where they should be, where they hope to be, for themselves and for their children. If they don't finish a job, at least they get a start to a certain degree for their children, and hopefully the next generation will pick up and continue the effort, continue to realize the China dream. Everybody deserves their dream. So in Australia, there's an organization, Australian Strategic Policy Institute. So when you develop the economy, it's a across the board effort. It's not just try to make money. So this Australian Strategic Policy Institute, they have a critical technology tracker. They have 5-year frame that compare globally, they track the technology advancement globally. But for the purpose of this talk, let's focus on, for this section, focus on US versus China. The US led in 60 of the 64 technologies in the 5 year from 2003 to 2007. In the most recent 5 years, however, which is the 2019 to 2023, US leads in only 7 fields. So went from 60 to 7, went down. But for China, 2003 and 2007, China led in what's that? China's led just only 3 out of the 64, when US led 60 of the 64. But in the latest 5 years, 2019 to 2023, China is leading 57 of the 64. That to give you a little bit more like a sense of pace. In the prior 5-year period, which is 2018 to 2022, China led 52. So after 5 years, they went from 52 to 57, and US is only has 7 in the lead. In the same time, US has been de-industrialized, and China's industrial capacity has grown to 33% of the whole world's industrial capacity. which is bigger than the US, Japan, and Germany put together. Imagine the amount of energy. However, we go back to the China status as a third world country, global south. The value added, given all the industrial capacity of China, the value added is 12%. It's like your gross margin is only 12% out of your industrial capacity, out of the goods that you produced. You only earn 12% of the margin, profit margin. US now is deindustrialized, but when the US is the highest of its industrialization, which is the 1970s, US had the gross margin of 35 to 40%. See the discrepancy, see the gap between 12 to 35%. So China wants a new bargain. Like I said, they don't want to be in the third world country in the global south forever. They want to make progress. They want to get there. As a country, that's where they put their energy at. So they want to close the gap between 12% to somewhere between 35 to 40%. That's the China dream. And that's the problem. That's what the US sees as a problem. We'll get to that. The good old capitalism and socialism. We probably very familiar with the contest, the fight, if you will, between these two ideologies. But here, I want to talk about it in the context of China, because I mentioned U.S. A lot of people in the U.S., if not most, see the China dream going from 12% to 35%, the gross margin, or even 40%. That's a problem because they think when China gets there, what do we eat? And also that from there, they will talk about China threat as a CCP, Chinese Communist Party. When it comes to China as a political system, Chinese Communist Party, but when it comes to economic system, they say China is a capitalist country. Because if you're on the capitalist side, if you insist that capitalism is superior to socialism, you want to take a successive story and call it capitalism. So in this context, China is undisputed economic success. So you want to make a capitalist country so that your side, which is capitalist side, is a success, still superior than socialism. But I'm here to point out China is a socialist country. I'm not talking about Chinese. They declare their Chinese socialism with Chinese characteristics, and those things you can believe it or not. But I will tell you the reality. What's going on in China after their open and reform policy, the beginning of open reform policy, introducing the market mechanism. They call it the Communist Party cadre, the economists in that party in charge of economy policy, assisting the leader. The idea is, it's called birdcage economy, which means the economy is like a birdcage, and the bird will have freedom to, like a market mechanism, to fly, to move within the cage, but not outside the cage. But the government, the policymaker, gets to decide they want to make the cage bigger or smaller. Well, big or small, it's a cage. You don't get out of it. So that's one side social, because it's a socialism. They will not allow the market go beyond the socialist framework. China also has a tremendous amount of GDP is produced by SOE, state-owned enterprises. About 33% of Chinese GDP is contributed by state-owned enterprises. Where are they placed? They are placed in the critical sectors of the economy, serve as an upstream. If they produce some like mining industry, they're downstream private enterprises will use the product of the upstream state-owned enterprise. That's one example. Or telecommunications builders. They are the critical sectors of the economy. So to make sure that the sector is stable, to the economy is stable, it can make progress. So they have to control those enterprises. They also, China has a very elaborate 5-year plans. Every 5 years, they put out the 5-year plans. Simultaneously, they start working on the next 5-year plans. It takes 5 years to collect the data, to decide what to do, to decide collectively, the government, decide what to do. It takes time. And then toward the end of 5 years, they have put out the report for the National Congress to discuss, to publicize what was accomplished in the previous 5 years. This on and on cycle, never ending, very elaborate 5-year plans, unseen in capitalist countries such as United States. That's why China, another reason, China is a socialist country. And China, that system is able to lift 800 million people since the reform and open policy, 800 million people out of poverty. That's the whole point of socialism. I don't see capitalism does that. Capitalism, they claim the rising tide lifts all boats. But again, you have to look at where the tide of capitalist country like the US never in the wildest dream started, or wildest nightmare started as a Haiti level. But China started at Haiti level. So it takes socialism to lift 800 million people out of poverty. And other countries, well, I digress. Other countries, they started where China was, but they used democracy. Their political systems have checks and balance, democracy, and they use capitalism. And they use capitalism. They didn't get to lift poverty, or 800 million people out of poverty, or at all. There are numerous examples. Actually, China is pretty much the only country that lifts the most people out of poverty under socialism. Only socialism in that condition, under that circumstances, those circumstances can accomplish that. Okay, people will say, well, China has stock market. How can a country with stock markets be socialist, not be capitalist? Then I will submit, we have to have, China has a lot of things that the West has, but you have to have a sense of what is that? A sense of proportion. Tim, I'm ready for the graph. When you're ready.
First slide.
Yeah. The second, I already skipped the first one.
All right, second slide. Let me get it up for you.
What Tim's going to show you on the screen is this graph of the Chinese. It's called CSI index. That's the index for all stocks traded in Shenzhen and Shanghai stock exchanges. You can see for the past 20, 25 years, right? That's the one. If you can see the beginning, at the end of the 2020s, barely moved. You'd be upset if you invest in that kind of stock market. But throughout that time, Chinese economy, let's say Chinese economy before it has a GDP growth of over 10% a year. It's essentially in those days, China grew a Britain every year. China grew a Britain every year. In the more recent times, it's about 5-6% a year. So China grew a Vietnam plus Thailand each year. That's tremendous growth, especially when you consider accumulating this 20-some years, compounding. When we talk about growth year over year, it's compounding. I don't have to calculate you, it's a tremendous number, but the stock market barely moved, only a few percentage points from the beginning to the end. Because stock market is not important in China, certainly does not reflect the GDP growth. I don't know why stock market should reflect GDP growth anyway, but in Chinese case certainly doesn't, because stock market, for one thing, is not in the Chinese government's priority. It's not only in the low end of the list of priorities, it's not even in the list. Xi Jinping doesn't lose sleep about stock market performance. As when you look at the US, the Federal Reserve looks at stock market when they're deciding on the monetary policy, and the government looks at stock market. People judge the government's performance in terms of economy by looking at the stock market. People are upset when the market goes down, when they cheer when the market goes up. It's tremendous importance. And if Tim, you can go to the next one. If you can, I can just use verbally. When you look, well, I'm contrasting to the U.S. situation. The next one Tim's going to show you is the S&P 500 in the United States. Look how much they grew.
And gonna be,
I can tell you before it's rendered, 600% among in the same time frame. Look at that. Look at that. Among the same time frame, 600% growth. How much did U.S. economy grow in GDP? Well, let's say U.S. economy typically grow 2%. So about 20 years, about 16%. It compounded 70%, 80%. But the stock market grew 600%. And that means we have a lot of things that made the stock market grow, other than the economic growth. So it's not powered by economic growth. It's powered by printing money. So government prints money. Oh, we don't have a very high inflation in terms of your everyday the goods, services that you purchase. All the money goes into two places mainly. One is stock market, the other one is housing market. So you see the housing market is going up like crazy, and stock market as well. Believe me, money the government prints has a way to be funneled or directed in those two fields, which are a lot of rich people. They get richer by investing in those two markets. Top 1%, top 10% of Americans held 93% of the stocks, and the bottom 50% of Americans held 1% of the stocks. And the rich people are the donors for the politicians. Tim, if you will, the next slide will be
okay,
NASDAQ. NASDAQ is even more ridiculous. It's not 600%. The same time frame, similar time frame, it's 6,000%. Who benefit from it? Those Silicon Valley, Wall Street, multi-billionaires and multi-billionaires. And they live there. A lot of them are CEOs. They have bonuses. The performance bonus is tied to stock markets. When the stock market goes like this, they're happy. They're happy with the politician. They will donate more money. And also their assets, like Elon Musk, his worth like $400 billion. His wealth, his net worth can go up and down day by day by billions of dollars or tens of billions of dollars, simply because the market is fluctuating. So those people, powerful people in this system, they're the people who are controller politicians. They care about the stock market. So the politician will make it happen for them in the market. That's why you have this out of proportion stock market growth. compared to the economic growth. So you see how the energy in the United States is kind of distorted. It's kind of very cynical, very class kind of thing. Class, the first certain class takes advantage at the expense of the other classes. That's how the energy was expended, distorted, as opposed to other, especially third world countries, global south. They essentially had the whole country energy directed in one direction, but the US directed in multiple directions, probably along class lines. And the capitalism is moving forward. Moving forward is changing. First of all, capitalism is not for free market. Free market capitalism is kind of oxymoron if you consider the reality. Recently, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he invited Peter Thiel, the PayPal, part of the PayPal gang, original person, is now as a financier, venture capitalist for the U.S. industries. He's heavily invested in Silicon Valley. He was invited by Sam Altman to give a speech about capitalism, about his ideas of how to run a business. He said, "We want monopoly, period. We don't want competition." He said competition is for losers, for patsies. So that's what capitalism is.
No, it's not.
But capitalism is moving into a different stage. We can call it techno-feudalism. I can give you a case in point. Amazon. Amazon.com is not a market. Market is a competition. But Amazon.com is a thief, belong to the Lord called Jeff Bezos and his lieutenants. They're in charge of that thief. They decide policy. Who would they let in? And the policy, they will decide who will expose your product, your page to the consumers. They also have algorithm to decide that. Via recommendation, if you get on their site, they will recommend, oh, this page also that have the products that you're interested in. Also, Alexa, the little receiver, speaker sitting in the corner of your house, pick up information about you over time. She knows better. She knows what you need, what you want better than yourself, because they have the algorithm, they have database, cloud, and they get to decide. So even the traditional capitalists, entrepreneurs, they're under the thumb or they're under the control of the new feudal lord, Amazon, the elk site, Amazon.com. And that phenomenon is not there in China. China's Jack Ma, for example, he was totally under the government's control. He doesn't get to be a feudal lord.
Jack Ma.
Jack Ma is the first Jeff Bezos in China. Now there are a couple of, but he doesn't get to decide beyond his own domain. Also, he doesn't get to decide the way Jeff Bezos does for Amazon.com, but he does own, he used to own, he started the biggest e-commerce site, similar to Amazon.com. But when he tried to expand into financial sector, his idea was knocked down by the government.
Was that Alibaba? Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, Alibaba. Ant Group. Ant Group is the owner of Alibaba. He wants to expand Ant Group to financial sector, banking sector. It was knocked down by the government. Right before they went on the biggest IPO of humankind, it was canceled. That's another example of the system difference in system between the U.S. and which is capitalist country, China, which is other. You can call it socialist. So we know where we are right now, how it came about. Oh, by the way, the techno-feudalism, how did it grow? The government helped them grow. We've had the quantitative easing since Great Recession of 2008 for many years, and then it died down to avoid like hyperinflation. But during COVID time, the government tried to print checks to give loans to businesses, print checks to individuals to tie them over of the COVID lockdown. At the same time, they give a lot of benefits, a lot of capital by printing money to those Jay Bezos, those billion-dollar oligarchs. So, in hope of them to invest, to hire people, to keep the economy from tanking, or even further grow the economy, but they're not doing what the government asks them to do. They take the government's money, but they don't do the thing. Because they don't have the outlook for them to justify the kind of investment. Instead, they invest in cloud, data center, algorithms, and AI to build up their techno-feudal. So that's how they grew. That's how they got their start or got their break. So that's where we are today. We see where the energy is directed in different worlds, and what's the future holds for us. China, we probably saw the headline news. China economy is in trouble. Internally, externally, the Western Europe, U.S. try to decouple with China. U.S. has a lot of sanctions, a lot of Chinese companies in their sanction list, where they block the highest technology from the U.S., block the access for those Chinese companies in the name of national security. Also, U.S. wants to get their allies to decouple from China. So that's a challenge for them from outside. Internally, they're facing a challenge too. The high unemployment, the property housing bubble burst. But if you look at under the hood, China is in transition because the 33% of the world industrial capacity in China, remember I mentioned earlier, it's up to the limit. China cannot grow in that way anymore. Instead, China, the productivity growth, because you grow productivity, meaning productivity means each unit of input, how much coming from the other end as output. Efficiency, productivity. That growth has stopped at around 2015. So the rest of the growth in China is the size, but they're bigger, but they're not working smarter. It cannot continue. So they have to try to transition into the next stage, next phase of globalization. So the system that was set up after World War II, headed by US, they have a peripheral, they have the core. The core of the globalization, because in the industrial age, you have to trade. Trade means it's a big part of globalization. And the other side of globalization is the free flow of capital. You're able to flow your capital, take capital from one country to the next country. You're able to move the goods from one country to the next to another country. That's globalization. In that arrangement, the US, the G7, if you will, the first world countries, they're in the core. They have the technology, they have the capital, they have the know-how, and the rest of the world is in the peripherals. And China is the biggest beneficiary in the peripheral. But that's peripheral. You don't want to stay in peripheral forever, because that way you will stay third world country. So that's a challenge China is facing. They want to upgrade technologically their supply chain, so they can keep grow, not just the size, which is up to the limit already on the to hit the ceiling. They want to continue the growth by working smarter, meaning they using more innovation, technical innovation for the growth. How do they do that? They do that from like top-down way of doing it, which is unseen in countries like a couple of countries in the US, once again. Top-down means government at the top make policy. The policy is supply side policy. It's the US, you see a little supply side, a lot of demand side. Stimulation, that's all about the demand side. China's transition, well, they care about the demand side, but to transition to the next phase of globalization, they do top-down supply side policy. So they can push their added value add to 12%, from 12% to between 35 to 40%. That, like I mentioned, that's why U.S. has problems with. That's why we had this contest or a confrontation, almost like a confrontation in the world stage today. It's centered around that. That's the driver. The latest, there's this strategy from the US called small yard, high fence. That means US still has a critical technological advantage in certain fields that's very critical. So they make it not accessible to most, only to small few allies. You know who they are. So those are protected by fence in a small yard. Now, outside the fence, no access to that technology. That's why small yard, high fence. So that naturally spells the death of globalization from the US standpoint. The globalization is done. We don't want any more globalization. In Trump's terms, all other countries, they took advantage of us. It's too much. I'm putting an end to it. So small yard, high fence, end of globalization. But is it the end of globalization, really? There's a big world out there. They can have a globalization without the US, without your small yard. They develop their own technology. Like I said, it's China leads in 57 out of 64. They can independently, or they can be the globalization, and it will be up to the people, the countries in the small yard, whether they want to join or not. They're welcome if you want to join, but if they refuse, they will be isolating themselves. Speaking of isolating themselves, I think one thing US needs to do is so obvious that they can stop. It's so obvious and simple. So obvious and simple, they can stop any moment. They can stop tomorrow, which is using the US dollar as a tool for geopolitical purposes, meaning sanction. Sanctions. There are all kinds of sanctions. There are a lot of countries in the world now under US sanction. Not only them, the other countries, they saw that. They lose trust in the US dollar. Trust is everything. Ultimately, trust is everything. If people lose trust in you, over time, they will develop something around you, some alternative. That really spells trouble for yourself. Right now, you have the advantage. You're able to use that, but you're eroding your trust every time you use it. Ultimately, it's going to come back to you. And that's what US can stop doing. And to stop the downward sliding of the trust in the US dollar. And US dollar's status is very important for the US status as a power, also with our living standard. So that's when US can stop immediately. That's what Trump also said. He understands, with all the faults of Trump, he understands the importance of the US dollar status. US dollar at the beginning of the end of the World War II, the arrangement called Bretton Woods arrangement, US dollar was the dollar for world trade, along with the institutional design of the architecture, financial architecture. In the beginning, dollar was better than gold because holding dollar, you can earn interest. Holding gold, you cannot earn interest. And then dollar is as gold. Over time, because US trade deficits, other economic problems, dollar is less than gold. It's not as good as gold until Nixon cut the tie between dollar and gold in 1973 at the end of the gold standard. And dollar is fiat money. Up to this day, because the repeated use or abuse of dollar in the sanctioning of the many countries, the dollar, you had to threaten people in order for them to hold dollar. See the difference. That can be reversed pretty quickly because US still first world country, still the most powerful economy in the world. So they can reverse that just like that. They can have a policy tomorrow in the Oval Office, first thing in the morning. They can start the slide, maybe reverse it a little, continue to, at least you can stem off that disaster. And in that part, you can reverse it. It's just simple as that. It's about trust. People look, and you show them your action, they will decide whether they put more trust in you or less, just like that. So let's hope we will head the right direction. Let's hope the world, especially the US, does not continue to consider the economic growth, the energy where the Chinese people were the global South, the people in that area of the world put their energy. I hope the US will consider it as a win-win situation because it is. And so the whole world can prosper at the same time, as opposed to try to kill each other with tariffs and retaliation. Let's hope that's the direction we're heading. But individually, as I demonstrated, the stock market is where if you have money, you put stock market, because that way the government will take care of you along with their donors. Might as well take the ride with them if you're able. That's very simple. All right, thanks.
All right. All right.
Let's take our speaker now. Yeah. All right, who's got the first question? Go ahead.
All right. Who's got the first question? All right, go ahead and speak loudly, please.
The gentleman behind you.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Real loud, please.
United States, a lot of automobiles and a lot of people working on the first car. Today, more automobiles with much less people. We're trying to go through the same.
Will China go through the same experience as U.S. manufacturing does with making more vehicles with less workers?
China, in terms of automobile industry,
That was an example. Just because it happens everywhere. They're making more things for less people. China, is China new for that, or will China go down that road also?
China came from different place than the US. China came from, once again, Haiti poor, no industry, to today. They have, in the beginning, there's this grand bargain between China and the US. I mentioned the US deindustrialized, at the same time, US financialized. That's a grand bargain because you have 1%, I'll get to that, 1%, 99%, 1%, 99%, 1% made their wealth, not only because of tax cut for the rich and the stuff. The critical way they made their wealth is the grand bargain. They offload their industry to overseas, mainly China, so they can capitalize on their cheap labor. At the same time, they will financialize their industry, so Wall Street will benefit because those other countries, they made their dollars, they will invest in Wall Street. So that's a grand. Yeah, I got your question. I'll get it. And that's the grand bargain. And that's why China came from different place. They're industrialized, but they're industrialized starting with the low end. Start with the low end, not automobile, low end. Maybe they inch their way up to the middle section. Over time, they ran the capacity, went to ceiling, and then they have to increase the productivity. That's what you're talking about. You make more with less. Make more output with fewer people. So that's the challenge they're facing right now. They want to modernize, make their supply chain more efficient by using technology, by using new methods, by using innovation, real innovation. So that's what they're doing right now. Right. They have to deal with the same, good point. They will have to deal with the same issue. There's some cities, they already have driverless cabs, like California does too. So many cities, they have that. You know, the driver is going to lose their jobs. They will have to deal with the same thing.
All right, we'll go with Ernie, myself, and Jan.
Okay, Charlie's also in there in the mix too.
I see Charlie.
Refer to the US having 64 and the out of 64 is going down. 7 out of. What exactly are the areas?
Yeah, technology areas.
Now, how are the numbers created that cause us to be able to rank them?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the methodology. I'm just laying up, highlight that as a relative terms.
Is it production? In other words, in any given category?
I think maybe your paper, your patent,
Yeah.
your academic, your how many papers, how many patents,
Okay.
and that has to be, those have to be factors. I don't know the whole methodology they use.
I'd like to ask them that now.
Right. But because the reverse is so drastic,
It is.
even though it's 50% wrong, it's still, you can see the reverse. Yeah, and it's made by Australia, the very faithful US ally. It's not some kind of Chinese mouthpiece or propaganda machine. So it's in that context, it's very believable, it's valuable in my reasoning.
Okay, who's
What's
next?
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
My question is this. We call China the global south. Why is it south when it's in the northern hemisphere?
Right, that's just the name, because relative to Europe, south, Springfield is south of California, still northern hemisphere, still, this south is a relative term. So the south tend to be warmer. They have more agriculture products like rubber, spice. In the south, where Europe is kind of too cold for that. But Europe, at the time, they have the energy. They had the energy to develop the industry. That's where the Industrial Revolution started. So they have the industry, but they need the material that grew from the soil. in a warmer climate, which is in the south of Europe. So you have global south for historical reasons, global south and global north.
Okay,
All right, we'll go with Jan,
and then
Charlie, and then this gentleman here.
Hey, Jen,
You know, I view the financial exposure of industry and other entities that run our lives. If, who have the money that are supporting these things, and especially the who have the money have financialized all kinds of products. They're not the ones who know how to do it. They know how to manage the money, but they don't know how to, for example, manufacture a bicycle. And I knew that's what I was sure. Musk does know. He's one of the exceptions of this person who knows what's going on.
What's your question?
Well, my question, okay, I view this as a big problem, and I think it's going to crash because the courts don't understand it. And I wonder if you see that as a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem because the loss of industrial capacity is a problem for the long term. But for now, only a certain class of the Americans they benefit from it because they get to benefit from the grand bargain with third world countries, mainly China. So, but over time, there's a problem like Ukraine war. They don't have the industrial capacity to supply Ukraine with the shells, with the ammunition, with the gun shells and all that stuff. So did Western Europe. So that is a problem. In the long term, not only the loss of factory jobs, ultimately because you keep running the trade deficit, although Wall Street benefits from it because of the countries that make the US dollar will invest in Wall Street. But ultimately, you cannot keep accumulating your deficits, whether it's the federal government deficit or your trade deficit. So that ultimately will be a problem. And also, I forgot to mention, the tariffs is a form of consumption tax. And consumption tax hurt the poor people more than they hurt the rich people. That's another way of wealth transfer. As opposed to income tax. Well, tax income is not good either, right? But for this context, for my purposes, I want to point out the tariffs is another consumption tax.
All right, we'll go with this gentleman in the back, or excuse me, Charlie in the back, then George.
all right,
All right,
Charlie, go.
what percentage of China's wealth can be traced to the operation of sweatshops? I don't believe they have any. What are the conditions of employment in most of the economic enterprises in China? I don't believe that they have any evidence of unions or labor laws.
Yeah, the sweatshop. In the past, we're talking about your information is probably 10 years out of date. They used to have, because it's all relative, you have people from the countryside they were used to be dirt poor. So if they got to go to a city or a small town or a bigger city to work in a factory, for them it was a big step up. Sweatshop for them it's a big step up in their life, improvement of their lives. Now they're not satisfied. They want to keep growing their lives. So that's the demise of the sweatshop. If you keep running a sweatshop, no one's going to work there. We're not talking about the law, the labor law. The normal have normal order of things is you have the standard, you have the advancement, you have the economic growth, then you have labor law. If you have labor law first before your economy reaches that level, you're killing yourself. So
You're killing yourself
the
by
labor
having
law,
labor laws?
Question.
the labor law aside, sweatshop is no longer simply for practical reasons. Of course, they have labor law. They don't have the union, the labor union like we have here or Western Europe. They have some union organization. They probably don't have a big right to go on strike, that sort of thing. I don't have the details, but they do have labor law. They do have labor protection. Oh, big time labor protection. The individual, it's very hard to fire individuals. You have to give them the 6 months salary, something like that. They have a similar law. They have a number of hours limits. They don't have child labor anymore. But all of that is because the economy reached a certain level. They're able to do that. If you don't do that, employers don't do that, you're going to get in trouble with your employees, let alone the government, the law.
All right, this gentleman, George, and then who else has a question?
I do.
Tim.
Let's, okay. Go ahead, sir.
First reading the definition as far as killing the person, and are they still
Yeah, that's a loaded question. Like, if I asked you, sir, are you still beating your wife?
That's a good question.
I mean, that's it. I mean, I don't make a judgment. Good question, bad question. I will answer any question. You know, the more pointed question, the more I like it. But I'm just pointing out for the rest of the audience. I'm not going to ask you if you're still beating your wife. The Tibet issue, you're asking a very broad question in one sentence. Actually, there are different issues. Tibet is a sovereignty issue. China will not let Tibet leave the country, so they have to suppress the secession movement. That has nothing to do with economy. Actually, Tibet doesn't have much of an economy, but right, human rights. You don't have the human rights to call secession. Like U.S. never gave that human rights. That's why Civil War was fought. For 4 years, hundreds of thousands of people died. And the Xinjiang, it's all rumor. It was not. There's no evidence. And people who started that rumor and who were boosting that rumor, they stopped talking about it. So Xinjiang is the northwest part of China, and where they say.
All right, here.
Initially, it started with a lot of terrorism because of the secession movement. They used terrorism not only in Xinjiang. They went to other parts of China to attack people. So they had to crack down by tighten control. But there's no slave labor or any of the thing that people try to push the narrative about. And as far as human rights, I say no. Very few countries, including the U.S., will not allow the human rights or the rights to leave the country. No part of the union in the United States has a right to leave the country, and China doesn't allow that either. And China will do what they can. The government will do what they can to stop that.
Okay,
All right, let's go to George, Tim, and then who else has a question? All
okay.
right, we'll go with round two.
Do you think manufacturing will make a comeback in the United States?
Probably certain sectors, not in a big way, not in a. Well, of course, I cannot preclude the possibility of certain sectors if they do the right thing, really, because the way the system's set up in the U.S., the capitalist system, maybe we'll discuss. The capitalism set up is the capitalists. It's over the politicians. So if it's to their benefits to continue to capitalize third world countries' cheap labor it's not in their interest to bring the industry back. So something else will have to happen to, for the industry to come back to the United States. And we haven't seen any sign of that. We only see the tariffs, but tariffs alone is not going to make it happen.
Trump is trying to do it.
All right.
I haven't seen any concrete proposal or policy that Trump is doing, other than tariffs. Like I said, tariffs alone, it's not going to accomplish that. But I know Trump is using tariffs dual purposes. One is economic purpose. He's hoping that's maybe the first step to bring the industries back. The other purpose is to use it as a tool for geopolitical struggle with other countries, to suppress some countries, to fight the Chinese, to threaten Russia, to threaten Ukraine. That's a geopolitical tool.
All right, Tim, and then we'll go back over here.
What are your view, have you heard of a guy by the name of Thomas P.M. Barnett and his views?
Maybe I heard his views, but I didn't match the name.
Well, the thing is, he gave a lot of similar stories. You combine him. What do you think about globalization in general? Do you think it's benefited the world or detracted from the world?
It benefits the world. Initially, the arrangement after World War II, back to the core and peripheral scheme. It benefits the core more than the peripherals, but also peripherals, they're being benefited. Biggest example, China, along with other smaller examples. But they're not going to stay there because they want to keep growing. One of the keys about the economy is you have to keep growing. If you stagnate, it's a really bad thing. Of course, if you're going backward, it's even worse. But you don't want to stagnate. That means you keep growing. Let alone those countries, they're still in developing status. They cannot be satisfied, and they're not. They still put their energy in the growth.
Okay, as a
You
corollary.
already asked the question.
All right, that's fine.
All right, we'll go back.
All right.
You mentioned that Charlie brought up labor. The labor shift party was about 10 years behind. And about 10, 12, 15 years ago, that people coming out of buildings and those kinds of stuff. But today, what you were saying, people are healthy. But the biggest that heard was 996, where start at 9 a.m., work till 9 p.m., 6 days.
Right.
And
That's the internal thing. Also, that's mainly white collar workers. That's in,
China's moving towards a white collar economy.
not necessarily, because China still has the 33% of the industrial capacity of the world. So that's blue collar. So that's people, because it's hyper competition, competitive society. And it's not only in the workplace, in school too. The students, they're very competitive. Yeah, that's a problem. But that's a social problem. That's not a political problem. Or yeah, that's a social problem. Like any country, they have to solve their social problem. That's why the Chinese companies or products so competitive when they came out of the country internationally, like BYD, those brands are so competitive because they are the winners in the domestic market, which is 996, that kind of deal. They have been trained, if you will, internally, domestically. So when they come out of the country to compete with other countries, when they have very humane, very kind of easier work environment, they come out as a winner because they already trained in a tough situation. But that's not good for the long term. There's already backlash among young people. Young people say, I refuse to compete that way. I might as well lie down and just eat benefits. I just give up. Some young people have that attitude. So that's a backlash, that's a social problem. They even banned the use of play a video game. A school child on a weeknight, you're only allowed to play video game for 1 hour a night, or no big weeknight, something like that. They are able to ban the children from being addicted to video game, because all in all, it's not just workplace, not just the students, even little school children, they feel the competition. It's not as sustainable, or it's not good for the people. That's a change. But I can imagine as China's economy grows to a certain level into the like first world developed level, people will ask for more leisure time, less competition. Right now, their energy is still mainly directed into growth and competition. But when they have enough means, they have cultivated this kind of enjoy life kind of attitude or life outlook. They will change their outlook. The society will change. That's the happy path. We will see.
All right, let's go to Jan, Ernie, Charlie.
I wonder if you might comment the situation with miners in China and the fact that China uses a lot of coal that, and of course, uranium is probably it's the most dangerous job ever.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Yeah, China is building more coal.
And their miners die.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I believe you. I believe you. I believe that safety is more. Just like an economy, it develops a certain to the standards raising higher because the economy is getting richer. They have more energy in safety, energy into leisure. That's natural. That's not just that. I think that's a natural course of things. And yeah, in terms of you care about the environment, China is building coal-powered electric power plants on coal. Also nuclear. Also they develop new kinds of the generator, like I mentioned, thorium, and also fusion nuclear. But they have to do all. They have to do them all because the countries, the demand for energy growth is just too fast. They cannot just use one. They have to multiple, including solar power, wind power. So they do it all. And the miners welfare situation, work condition. I believe it's. I didn't collect the data on that, but I believe just like any other sectors, any other workers, that's improving.
All right, we'll go with Ernie, Charlie, and George.
How easy is it for somebody, responsible or somebody start a small business? Is that possible? The other question is, we have a lot of Chinese in politics. Now, Trump has the golden card problem. $5 million. So, if you're a wealthy person, not right. That's people coming here. But I think there are a lot of people going back to China. Have figures.
I don't have figures on that, but that's it. Yeah, that first of all, China still wants have market mechanism. Within a bird cage economy, they know the importance of market mechanism. They emphasize that because there are a lot of people in the rumors, the narrative, the anti-China people. They say, well, look at the current leader, the current administration, they're leaning toward left, more left. They'll be like Mao, they're going to suffocate the private enterprises. So to counter that narrative, they have recently, about a month ago, with a big conference with leading enterprise entrepreneurs, just to emphasize that the open and reform direction will not be changing. It's even expanding the government support of the private enterprises because the new challenges, because it's the new challenges that they're in transition. Private enterprises is more needed. So you can imagine it's easier to start a new business than before if changes at all. What's the second question?
Well, that was the data immigration.
Oh, yeah. That's a complex issue. I recently saw a video. Chinese, they come to the US for different reasons. Some come to study to get a degree. Some come to better life. It depends on your personality. Some people think, Chinese people think in Canada, US, the lifestyle, they don't have 996 here. And the kids have more leisure time to get more fun. They come here for their kids. They even go the route as like a Mexican immigrant, Central America. They landed at Paraguay or some South American country, which they have very lax visa requirements. So they land there. They take the same route as the other Southern and Central Americans. They come to the border. There are all kinds. There are some went to Zimbabwe. I just recently saw an interview. They asked a guy, why do Chinese people go to Zimbabwe? You can understand they come to the US, Canada. Why did they go to Zimbabwe? Which is a very, it's not a safe country, let alone the economy was bad. But he said some Chinese people, they go out there to make money. If they hear some success stories from someone before them, they probably will follow. That's certain people, they would do that. So you can see all kinds of reasons for all kinds of emigration to different destinations.
All right, we got Charlie, George, and who else has got a question?
Okay. All right, Charlie, go ahead.
Yes, Eric, I spoke a few years ago, and the U.S. Customs had seized any number of intermodal containers of toys, like dolls, children's dolls that they play with, and because they had been made with highly toxic, poisonous plastic chemicals. Is there any evidence of an Occupational Safety and Health Administration operating in China?
I'm sure that's part of the government. I don't have the concrete information, but I'm sure. I can bet money there's some occupational hazard related legislation. And okay, I'll be frank. I'm sure 100% there's such regulation, but how well are they implemented? That's a different question, which I don't have updated information on that. But all in all, I can pretty much guarantee you, that's the way I think, actually. All in all of those things are improving over time.
Because what evidence do you have that it's improving?
Certain standards, economy rises to a standard, people will demand it. And then it will be easy for the government to regulate, to set up, to make laws and regulate. That's just natural things.
Okay.
All right, let's go with
That's
George
baloney.
and person
All right.
on the phone.
Can war make a country rich? I mean, after World War II, the United States.
Or can make a certain segments of the country rich, certain section of the population rich, like weapons manufacturers. They definitely make money out of war. For the rest of the population, you can go trickle down, right? If the weapons manufacturers, those rich people get rich, they will spend, and other people will make money. Let's trickle down. Other people will get something. But the question is for them, for the weapons manufacturer, for example, it's a net gain. They definitely make rich. There's no question about it. For other people, it depends on where you are. Is it gain for you or net gain or net loss? That's a question. But overall, it's not a way to get rich, right? Because it's like you got blood on your hands. It's people die when you get rich. It's not a best way to get rich, but economically it does get rich. Well, World War II, government had a lot of debt. Government ran on debt, and the next generation will have to pay for it. So for the next generation, well, it's also the next generation. It's a question of is net gain or net loss. It's a complex question.
Okay, I think that's the caller. Is that you, Jake, with your hand up? Jake,
Give him a sec.
okay, Jake,
Hello?
okay. Yes, you're up, Jake.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your talk. My question, what do you think about the use of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin for international trade? Hello?
Yeah, he is, yeah.
I'm not sure how I look at it, but if people accept it. You know, okay, in BRICS, there's a proposal, there's a thinking within BRICS, the ICS, of having alternative trade currency, alternative to US dollar. And crypto is on the table. In Russia, they're the most active, the most motivated party in BRICS to have an alternative currency for obvious reasons, right? Russia is badly sanctioned by the West, by the US. US dollars is not good for them in terms of for international trade. So they're eager. Well, right now what they do is when they have trade, use local currency. If they trade with India, either use Indian currency or Russian ruble to trade. Forget about the third party utility type of currency, trade currency like US dollar. So cryptocurrencies was on the table. We can think of the benefits of cryptocurrency and a downside as well. So I don't have the special knowledge other than it's on the table. Will be up to a lot of course, the U.S. wouldn't want to any other currency, crypto or otherwise, to replace U.S. dollar as a trade currency. But as far as global South or BRIC countries, they will have to decide. I don't think they will go that far because when cryptocurrency is a lot of risk, because it's not based on anything. It's not even based on a sovereign power, let alone based on any commodity, something concrete. So it's inherently riskier than other currencies. So if BRICS comes up with a alternative trade currency, crypto is probably, or the Bitcoin, crypto, that kind of currency, is probably not going to be the first. They probably go with something safer first. Over the long term, maybe or maybe not, they will move that direction of crypto.
All right. Well,
Say follow up question. How do you regulate cryptocurrency to ensure that it's used right and to weed out fraud, to prevent fraud?
I don't have special knowledge other than you regulate cryptocurrency in two ways. One is the crypto market. You regulate it the way you regulate stock market, derivative markets, like CME. There's some element of it. And as far as the trading part, the usage part, you regulate it the way you regulate with bank accounts, checks, or credit card, that sort of thing. There's similarities. I don't have special knowledge other than that.
Okay, let's go to rebuttals. Unless
all
he's
right.
got, let's
thank our speaker, Eric.
all right, Eric.
And we'll go 5 minutes.
Oh, Calvin,
whoever
did you?
wants to go speak may take the microphone now.
Okay, Calvin, it's a rebuttal period. You want to say something? Calvin?
Yeah. Okay, just a couple of rebuttals. Early on in your lecture, you mentioned the fact that no country has brought themselves out of China, out of poverty the way that China has with capitalism and democracy.
while I appreciate the amount that China has brought themselves up out of poverty, may I also mention that there's other countries such as Thailand, South Korea, Taiwan, India, that all brought themselves out of similar forms of poverty using democracy and capitalism. You also said, with regard to Tibet, that no country would allow a state to disentangle themselves from a state. You are wrong. No dictatorship will allow a state to disentangle themselves from themselves. In 1920, the Republic of Ireland became a separate country from the United Kingdom. In 1990s, Czechoslovakia had an amicable divorce and became the Czech Republic and the Slovakian Republic. The huge swathes of the USSR, including all the Baltic states, became separate countries in 1990. Just as recently as a few years ago, the United Kingdom had a referendum whereabouts Scotland, had it voted, would have been a separate country. So you cannot turn around and say no country will let anybody separate. No, dictatorships won't let anybody separate because they want to cling on to power. So they're my two rebuttals. Thank you.
Okay,
All right, George, go ahead.
yeah.
Well, I got a little speech.
Okay.
America has the only major economy where output is above pre-pandemic trends. Its unemployment rate is hovering at 4%, well below the average of the past 3 decades. Inflation is set to return in 2025 to the Federal Reserve target of 2% annual rate. How will Trump's policies affect America's economy? He has vowed to unleash a wave of deregulation. He will make it easier for energy companies to obtain drilling permits, for tech giants to deploy artificial intelligence, and for financial firms to lend money. Trump also vowed to slash taxes. Two other parts of Trump's agenda present serious risk. He wants to raise tariffs to bring manufacturing back to America. And he wants to boot millions of illegal immigrants out of the country. Together, these policies could prove a harmful combination. They would drive up the price of imports and strip the economy of workers, thereby weighing on growth and fueling inflation.
All right, thank you, George. We'll go with Charlie. You got 5 minutes, Charlie.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank Eric for his economic analysis. And he seems to be an advocate of capitalism. And according to him, everything is wonderful, which I don't think it is. Everything is so wonderful. All this wonderful expansion and growth. It's another term for exploitation is expanding around the world. And it's certainly spreading to these southern globe, third world countries. Let me tell you how China operates. They recruit a workforce from the countryside, basically not terribly educated people. Apparently, you need to get permits in order to get employed. However, these are employed within without the proper papers and what have you. So they have to be careful about getting, it's much like our hiring illegal immigrants. That's what I mean. the large operations in China do not hire individuals directly. They use the hiring agents, employment agencies, so that if they are called on any conditions of employment or found guilty or in violation, they say, "Oh no, that you have to go to the employment agencies. They're the ones who do it." You know, that's how they can hire children from the countryside. Now, one of the things that's amazing about operation in this wonderful Chinese economy is that absolutely under no circumstances has a representative of the International Labor Organization or any investigative reporter ever been allowed inside some of the Chinese factories or operations. And even the employees, you can't even get to and talk to them. They're fearful of discussing or meeting with anyone if they certainly leave the premises. So it's anybody's guess what's going on or what they're covering up. But nevertheless, Mr. Mao seems to think it's improving somehow. I have no idea what forces are operating to improve the conditions of employment, but he seems to think there is something out there. Now, I'd like to see a comparison of a job in a factory in the United States in comparison with a job in China producing the same item and see what they are. It would appear that the Chinese capitalists are getting away with pay compensation at 1/4 the level that is paid in other countries. And apparently there's no benefits, days off, sick days, insurance, what have you, no paid benefits. So I can imagine on the base salary, it's not very good. But that's what I mean. I'm sorry, I'm not going to listen to this spin. And we've heard this from others here, pro-capitalist, that somehow this is only a stage of development and somehow there was going to be some evolution to economics. I don't know if that quite if it operates. There's no evolutionary process to this, and it appears that the only transference that goes on is that if that exploitation is brought in check in one place, the capitalist shows up in another. Anyhow, I'm sorry to be kind of negative on this, but listen, please come back and do a little more analysis. And I'd really like to know what's going on inside the factory walls, not just the product, the capitalist economic superficiality, Wall Street kind of indications. This is a system in which it entraps millions of people, and it was sold to us as beneficial. I'm sorry, to me personally, the benefit is I do not perceive it. Anyhow, thanks again. I guess you'll be coming back again in a short time later to talk about the bipolar world, and looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
All right. Anybody else got a rebuttal? Gentleman on Zoom.
All right, Jake, are you gonna rebut again?
Give him a second.
Jake?
Give him a second, Tim.
I am. All right, I'm gonna rebut.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm waiting to hear you.
Hello?
5 minutes, Tim.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh. Who?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for your talk. Just in contrast, I'm going to say capitalism is here to stay, for better or for worse. It needs to be better, more tightly regulated in order to protect people who are working, in order to protect the environment, in order to in order to basically protect the system from itself. There's unregulated capitalism can create a mess. I mean, we saw that in 1929 with the stock market crash. That's why there were regulations put in place to protect the stock market and protect the banking industry from collapsing and so forth. Capitalism is that's just how the system is. And in order to protect tighter regulations in order to protect the system from corruption and so forth. That's why I'm very skeptical about the whole Bitcoin revolution, because Bitcoin's there's nothing there. It's a fictitious form of currency that is basically a fictitious kind of type of currency which somebody invented, but it's all online currency, and it's very poorly regulated, and it's very open to corruption because it's esoteric. In other words, regular currency is backed up. Well, it used to be backed up by gold, but now gold standard is long gone. But now it's at least is backed up by goods and services. Bitcoin is not really backed up by anything that I can see. Anyway, what else? Capitalism can increase the rate of growth to a certain degree. It can't do everything. But also, the other thing I want to say is that socialism is not the perfect system either. The old Soviet Union was there was more environmental, what should I say, more environmental pollution and so forth within the old Soviet system than there is in the United States, and there's a tremendous amount of corruption in Russia and all the other former Soviet bloc countries, probably including China. So that's all I want to say.
All right.
All right, go ahead, Tim.
You guys might be shocked at what I've got to say right now, but the world needs more capitalism. The world needs much more capitalism. Why is it that a country can't grow? It's because a small business can't incorporate. It's because a small business might be overregulated, and it might be the big boys in the business world won't let the little guy through their wealth. We in the United States have a good system. It's called with every business opening up, and capital represents a representation of that thing. For example, if you were to buy a house in Egypt, for example, it would take you 16 years working every day to go through all the government hurdles to buy that house. Now, yes, there are people who can do it, but there's that much regulation. And that means there's also that much regulation when you open up a business or try to get a bank loan. Here in the US, it's usually a simple matter of filing some papers of incorporation, and then you can get to the bank loans, get to your country, and it also represents a source of identity. You see, we in the United States and in the West let businesses incorporate. We keep them legal. We have good legal means of doing stuff. And the poor around the rest of the world are not simply poor because they're not industrious and they don't work. They just can't they can sell to their brothers who might know, they might sell to somebody else who might know, but there's no title deed or no transference of ownership of businesses or business entities or properties or anything like that. And the system that goes and supports law is not as well made as like in Europe or anything else. So the first thing a country needs to do is get rid of a lot of the regulations that will prevent small businesses from forming. Secondly, you're also going to need some fundamental economic freedom, which also means domestic freedom, which means elections, free, fair, and clear elections. I'm not saying this out of spite because What Adam Smith did in his thing called The Wealth of Nations in 1776, he was well known about the dominance of the major corporation. There was one called the East India Tea Company that had its own private army, that had its own private government over several things, and was chartered by the English crown. And the point of the matter was that when this happened, the middle managers made all the money, not the stockholders, not anybody else, but it was all quite a bit of something else that was going on. Now, the thing that I want to understand is this: we need more capital and capitalism. What that simply means is that we need to get the financial house in order. What that means is that we need to have competition. We have in the United States right now what's called oligarchy, which means few people at the top that are running everything. And like we did under Theodore Roosevelt, we need to use the rule of breaking up the trusts. And also, besides breaking up the trusts, you do need unions in an environment like this when all the wealth is held at the top. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to be the end all, but we really didn't start prospering until we started getting some unions in there to represent workers' issues. We really didn't start prospering until some of these major monopolies were broken up. And then watch what happened. After World War II, we were the only game in town. We were the only advanced real industrial economy that hadn't been majorly damaged by war. And that's why we were prospering so much after the war. Once we got rebuilt and the competition got back up to normal, we started prospering. That's all I got to say. We need more capitalism, not less. And socialism is nothing less than a form of oligarchy, Charlie. And that's why it
Yeah,
doesn't
more
work.
exploitation. Yeah, go out, go home wearing your sweatshop made clothes, sweater.
You think
All
happened in the
right,
Soviet
we
Union,
have somebody
Charlie?
else who's going to be speaking.
Go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, give us a second.
Hello, slow on my feet, sorry about that. Yeah, the East India Tea Company, it was the world's early experience with capitalism, and it was awful. Like Tim said, they had their own army. They were an awful group. Now, in the West, what we call the North, what we call the West, they had various ideas of what capitalism could and couldn't be. But the East India Tea Company into East Asia, and the East Asians saw this behavior of profit was the god. It was just awful. And I believe that the people from the East mimicked that behavior and thought it was capitalism. I believe that's how the Japanese became so violent, because they were just mimicking the East India Tea Company. But along the lines of back to China, China had a Belt and Road Initiative. And the Belt and Road Initiative was supposed to be something where they would move they would offer a country the opportunity to build ports and things that would be part of the Belt and Road that would get goods shipped from China to the world. And in Ceylon, for example, they offered to build a modern seaport, a modern distribution. What happened in Ceylon? They used Chinese companies with Chinese labor, with Chinese financing, to the point where everywhere that the Belt and Road Initiative took place, it's called for China, from China, for China, about China. Everything was all Chinese. And what I mean by that is, when they went to Ceylon, they said, we will build it here, and the Ceylonese people thought they would use their local labor to build. It didn't happen that way. The Chinese government, the Chinese corporation imported their own Chinese labor to build these things. Ceylon was held with a debt, couldn't pay the debt off, and then China came by and said, okay, you don't have to pay. We'll just take it over. And it was an awful, but straight out of the East India Tea Company playbook. The idea that you can grow forever is such an ancient, backward idea. You cannot grow forever. You can change forever, but you can't grow forever. You know, it's like the idea that you can build houses forever is what got one of the things that is hurting China. You simply cannot grow forever. And the other thing I don't understand about China, and when I mean this, you have to really distinguish between the Chinese people and the Chinese government. But what's interesting is you go to a place like the Middle East, and you see they dress traditionally, they have their attitudes, but they all dress as Middle Easterners. Or you go to India, and they dress, or Pakistan, and they dress like Central Asians, you know. And you go to China, which is telling everybody, we are Chinese, we are different. And they all dress like Westerners, and they say they follow Marx, with Western what out of England. And it's like, what in the world is Chinese about you? You know, you are not behaving Chinese. You know, it's a big disappointment. And what I would like our speaker to, I don't know if you know about the part in the American history where it was the trust busters, Teddy Roosevelt and the trust busters. And that's the time when we also had oligarchies and a great concentration. At the time, the proper was to break that apart and start competition.
Hello?
Yeah,
Wrong number.
switching out the guard.
Wrong number.
Actually, Eric, thank you. Good, well-researched talk with a lot of data in it like that. I hope you'll make your talk available, maybe online or whatever, because you've got a lot of data in there, and I don't write that, get it all down. Anyway, we enjoyed the talk and learned some things. The main point I would like to make is that all countries, China is a blend of socialism and capitalism, but so are we. Every country in the world is a blend. I don't think there are any countries that are pure communist, pure socialist anymore. And there are none that are pure free market as we are. I've said this many times before, I'll probably say it many times again from this because I think it's kind of an important thing to note. Another thing I want to reiterate what you said about tariffs really being a consumption tax. It's a tax that will be paid by the buyers. In this case, tariffs that we put up, that Trump puts up, will be taxes that Americans pay. And it basically what it does is, I think you mentioned this, Eric, it shifts the tax burden from upper income people down to lower income people. And so we want to be careful. We want to worry about that. And where these tariffs go will be interesting. I think there will be a lot of changes over the next few months, but it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And I have some more questions on this. I wanted to ask, we didn't have a chance. I don't know if you have a chance in your final seconds to talk about this, but Taiwan versus China. I'm curious to where Taiwan is in this. Now, obviously, they are much smaller than China, but what kind of a per capita GDP do they have, and where do they fit in this technology? I know that as of now, Taiwan is the world's #1 producer of computer chips. I believe that's still the case. And are they interacting at all? What kind of trade do they have? And how is that political thing going to end? I think she said that 2027 is the year that they're going to go in and take over Taiwan. I want to know if you have an opinion or any inside information on that. And another question, not just for you, Eric, but for everybody, is now that USAID is gone, how is that going to affect China? How are they going to take advantage of that? We assume they'll take advantage. We'll assume that a lot of nations will try and step in where the U.S. is stepping out. But I'd just like to know what people think of that. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Ernie.
All right, I'm gonna go, and then we'll go to Eric for his final rebuttal.
Okay, hang on, Eric. He's got one more rebuttal, and then we'll go to your final wrap up.
I got one.
All right, so the American Civil.
Peter Perro's also got one too.
All right.
We'll go Justin and
Thank
we'll
you.
go
All right.
Peter.
All right, so the American Civil War was fought because Fort Sumter was attacked. They seceded. They may have, maybe they would have been successful. I don't know. But they attacked Fort Sumter, which brought about the invasion of the South by the Union. And the reason for their secessions was to continue the practice of slavery, which their economies were based on. So I don't think that all secessionist movements are equal. I think they would only be really justified if the resultant state would be more free than the state that it was seceding from. Would a free Tibet respect religious freedom? Would it respect freedom of expression, freedom to own property? I don't know. If somebody knows how that sort of thing would play out, certainly would love to hear more. But one thing I did learn recently is that I am a descendant of a gentleman whose name was Francis Marion Young. Francis Marion being the Swamp Fox, who was a revolutionary during the American War for Independence. My ancestor fought at the Battle of Fort Davidson, which, though was a Confederate victory, the Union was able to distract them and stop them from their continued invasion of Missouri, and it stopped them from proceeding towards St. Louis. So I'm very proud of the fact that I have a heritage of stopping the South from aggressing into the North. So that is all I have to say.
Okay, Peter Perro, you're next. Peter,
Wow.
go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me though? Can you hear me?
Yes,
All right, good.
yes, we
Yeah, I want to thank Eric
can.
for I want to thank Eric Mouth for raising
Go ahead,
very important
Peter.
questions. Oh, I see the big mouth. There I am. I want to thank Eric for the important issues he raised. It should be on the minds of all Americans and our unions and our politicians who seem to have forgotten our needs and will do so for 3.5 more years. But it was really worthwhile hearing from Eric. I did miss the introduction, so I would like him to mention how he gathered this knowledge through visitation, through working in China. I'd like to know more. Is he a journalist? Is he a teacher, as I am? But I'm giving more credit to what China has done in about 30 years. And I think it is an economic miracle. I hope they use it wisely. I mean, what they gain from it monetarily. when I think of this economic miracle or this industrial miracle that Eric talked about, I think, yes, it wasn't about, uh, how can I say, enslaving workers. I think it was about finding more intelligent and in some ways eco-safe means of increasing industrialization. And that's all they had to really sustain them is to follow that goal, and they did it. I think in the U.S. with high-powered industrialization, it's about how can we make money? How can we make money from this high-powered now techno system? I think with China, it's how can we find a way to grow our economy and better the lives of our people. I really give more credit to China for doing that. And I like the idea someone mentioned that we can't grow forever. I like that. He made me think about that and ponder, but we can change forever. I hope the changes are for the better for the majority of people in this world. Thanks so much, everybody. It's good to hear an important, urgent topic this evening. Thanks for doing it, Eric.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Eric.
right.
With your
Eric,
final-
we're at one final rebuttal, Jake. We're not gonna take any more. Yeah, you won already. All right, go ahead. Let me get,
First of all, in response to Charlie's suggestion, I will embark on a project to do some underground investigation about the factory condition and their labor condition in general. But as of now, I have to point out there's no evidence of child labor in China. So if you adhere to the American spirit, innocent until proven guilty, and we can lay that to rest until you find evidence of child labor in China. And I insist, as far as I know, you can't prove, it's harder, if it's possible at all, to prove negative, which is child labor is negative. I haven't seen any. It's harder for me to prove it's negative because I keep saying I see nothing. I see none of such incidents. But I cannot prove it because it's negative. So for you would have to prove positive to tell me you're wrong. There's child labor. Until then, let's leave that to rest. And I will embark on the underground factory labor condition project. And as far as democracy, I will have to clarify. You say I didn't catch the name. Taiwan, Thailand, they have very developed economy, especially Taiwan. It's already in the league of developed country, if we call it a country, but it's no longer a third world region or economy. But I'm from Taiwan. I have to tell you, Taiwan's economic development was happening when Taiwan was still under authoritarian rule. After that authoritarian rule was phased out in history around the turn of the century, about the late late 1990s, that's when Taiwan's economy started to stagnate up to this day. So that's an evidence that, well, that's just another highlight of you cannot have Western style democracy or a Western style capitalism for a developing country or third world country to develop your economy. And China didn't choose that route. That's how China developed and still holds. Even with Thailand, Thailand's economy is not nearly developed. It's not like Taiwan. And it has a form of democracy, but it's also suffering from a frequent, while periodic military coup. South Korea. Same with Taiwan. South Korea is very similar to Taiwan. It has very it advanced the fastest when it was under strongman rule. Now it's even out once it's become a Western style democracy. So it's very parallel to Taiwan. And about the secession, I think it was raised by the same person or a different person. I didn't really follow there. I couldn't see the screen very well where I said. And I never said, I have got rid of that hobby of saying all or every or never, that kind of absolute terms. I kind of get rid of that habit many years ago. So I know I did not say, and I did not intend to say that all countries do not allow secession. I certainly fully aware that those countries that they hold elections to decide the secession question. But those countries have their circumstances. And granted, they apparently all Western style democracies. That's true. And Spain, for one thing, did not allow Barcelona or Catalonia or that region. They wouldn't even, I think they held an election, referendum, but they did not recognize it. They did not recognize the effect. And of course, Canada, England, and Scotland, they're decided by vote. But they have their historical background. Of course, they're very democratic, but they also have their historical background. For one thing, they don't have the power to stop the secession. I would argue there's a possibility if they had the power to stop the secession, short of using any kind of vote, they probably would do that. But they looked at themselves, they looked at their pocketbook, they look at their military, they look at people's will. They don't have that, so they resorted to a vote. And American, certainly as a counterexample, they don't have. Well, it's a complex. Justin pointed out how the Civil War was triggered. How was the fire was sparked. But we cannot ignore Abraham Lincoln, the leader of the North. He said, house divided cannot stand. He didn't say house divided under the condition of slavery in the South, there's no condition. Unconditionally, house divided cannot stand. That's Lincoln's thinking. And he's the leader of the North. He was the person that kept the war going until the North won. Of course, it's not single-handedly doing it, but he's the key leader. He did not waver on that account. So I was still told that U.S. is one country that does not allow secessionism in this history. And there's no clause, provision in the U.S. Constitution that stipulate how any part of the country can legally leave the Union.
Okay.
So, so you cannot expect that of China. China, of course, it's its own history, historical background, and circumstances. And the Belt and Road Initiative raised that this case of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is one of the early projects. China made a misstep by importing their labor from China, from the mainland, to the site where they do the construction. And that was widely criticized. They have since make it better or totally improved it. They don't do that. They know the backlash because initially they did that because it's easier, the same culture with the management, the same culture, the same language, the same work ethic, easier to manage than the local people. Wherever you go, it could be an African kind of crowd culture, it could be South America, it could be Sri Lanka, like an Indian type. So that was for convenience, maybe for profit, but they have since improved on that. So no longer a problem. And Sri Lanka, they went to China, they went to they had difficulty, financial difficulty because of the natural disasters. They went to World Bank. World Bank has certain conditions. The deal didn't work out. They went to Japan. They went to Western Europe. Some big banks didn't work out because those banks look at 5-year window. They need to have profit in 5 years. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. So finally, they came to China. China agreed to invest on some infrastructure, probably the port, along with the airport. And then the things went south. The financial situation, they couldn't repay the debt. China went back. They tried to restructure the debt. They even transferred the debt. One company transfer half, another company join in to restructure it. After a while, it still wouldn't work out. They will have to. It's in the contract in the beginning. If the debt cannot default, the collateral is the port. China gets to use the port for 99 years. That's the collateral. So if you buy a house on mortgage, if you can't pay the mortgage, you lose the house. That's the deal. So there's no complaint there. But also, I have to point out Sri Lanka's constitution forbids any foreign country to convert their infrastructure, their port, their airport, into military use. So under that, China is not able to use that port for military, for Chinese Navy. But they can only use that port to manage that port, to control that port for profit, for Chinese import. Why would
99 years?
99
Charlie.
years.
They're
99 years.
crooks.
99 years. If you couldn't pay your mortgage, you lose your house forever, not 99 years. So that's one example. Belt and Road is investment projects for countries that need it.
Okay, wrap it up.
I think I can wrap it up right now.
Okay.
We can discuss the Taiwan issue more in detail at the political level. I already answered questions on the economic level. They stagnated because of democracy. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, good one.
All right.
Next week, single payer health care.
All right, and at this point, I call the College of Complexes adjourned. Thank you, Eric. Thank you all for coming tonight.